Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you another Read It Backwards video. So in this Read It Backwards video we are going to be focusing on Percy Jackson and the Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan, which is the third book in the Percy Jackson series. If you don't know what Read It Backwards is, I'll have a link to my explanation video up above and down below so you can figure out what is going on here exactly. And before we get into this video, you need to know that this video is going to include
spoilers.
So we're just going to get right down to business. I've read a third of the way through the book and I have to admit I remember nothing of what goes on in this book. Absolutely nothing is ringing a bell for me. So in this one we start off with Thalia and Annabeth going to where Grover is, and I was like, oh, Thalia's already here? I actually thought Thalia was going to appear in this book because I thought she didn't come in till later in the series, but if she appears for the first time in the second book, then she's a bigger character in this series than I actually thought she was from my memory. Just surprised to see Percy, Annabeth and Thalia all as such good friends right from the get-go. I was surprised that they find Bianca and Nico in this military school. For some reason I thought that they were in a casino for the whole time, and that might just be the memories from the film replacing the memories from the book, which is not the best. I'd rather if I had the book memories, but I'm refreshing those memories now. Interesting that they were at the hotel. Also, at the very beginning of the novel, you can already see that you can already see that Percy and Thalia have a bit of competitiveness going on. Thalia being, you know, from Zeus, the top god, she knows her stuff so very well, and Percy, who's used to being the top dog, is feeling a bit inferior, and you could see that competitivity in just small moments at the beginning, but now a third of the way through that competitiveness is really starting to shine, and I did not expect that from Thalia and Percy. Also, while they're at the military school rescuing Bianca and Nico, there's a mention of Jesse McCartney playing, and wow, what a nostalgia, what a throwback. Beautiful soul, that used to be my jam. So Artemis and the hunters turn up and they get involved with the saving of Bianca and Nico, and Thalia really hates the hunters for some reason, and I was wondering, why does Thalia hate the hunters so much? Because as far as I know, she's going to eventually become one of them. And then she's got some antagonistic thing going on with Zoe, and I remember Zoe Nightshade's name, but I can't remember anything much else about her. Don't really like her character. In fact, I don't really like the hunters at all, which I wasn't expecting. I remember when I read this when I was younger, I was like, oh, the hunters sound so cool, but I don't like the way that they talk about themselves. Like, I don't even like the way that Artemis talks about the hunters. She's like, oh yeah, one day they'll probably grow up and become silly because they'll be into boys and stuff, and I was like, well, don't discredit them as female people. Like, it just seems a bit exclusionary. Like, she has one idea of what a good female person can look like, and if you don't fit that idea, you don't belong in the hunters, and if you associate with boys in any which way, you don't belong in the hunters. And I just don't really like the exclusionariness of it. If it was more so just celebrating different types of women, I could get behind it, but it still seems very exclusionist in its nature, and I just didn't like the way Artemis talked about the girls either. And then I also just really didn't like Bianca. I was surprised because I was all sad that she was dead when I was rereading book 4, but now that we've come across her, it takes her 5 minutes to choose to join Artemis and completely abandon Nico as a brother, and they've had each other's back for how many years while they've been stuck in that military academy. So I was just like, you're cutting off from your brother so quickly, so fast, especially when you've only just been introduced into this world. Yeah, she's a no from me. Nico, so far, is such an innocent and happy child, talking about his card game and so excited for everything, and I just know that by the next book all of that is completely ruined and he's haunted and he's all got these dark vibes going on. So it's just so sad seeing that and knowing that it's all gonna go away. At one point they go to Camp Half-Blood, and I'm telling you, my face every time they mention someone that I just know is dead because I've read the last book makes me so sad. Like, any mention of Beckendorf, the Stoll brothers, I can't. The book, of course, managed to make me laugh again. Percy Jackson never fails to get a laugh out of me multiple times as I'm reading. I also am very interested in some of this backstory that I'm hearing. They mentioned Thalia being a tree last book. I knew about that, so I did remember that. It was one of the things that I don't forget about the series. I mean, a human who was a tree turning back into a human, it's quite a memorable thing from the series, but he also mentions that he's on the bad side of the god Ares and had a fight with him, which could explain some of the animosity he has with Clarisse. So I'm looking forward to getting more backstory about that when I read further backwards into the series, and some other little things that they mention like Aphrodite's scarf and stuff. Looking forward to knowing more. And the last thing I have to say for this section is that I find it so entertaining that every single time their quest has a deadline, it's always winter solstice or summer solstice, so they've always got that deadline, which was a word that I learned from reading Percy Jackson actually, so it's just interesting to see that that's come up again. Gonna read another third and I'll get back to you with more thoughts. So I'm now 2/3 of the way through the book and it's time to discuss a little bit more. I don't have as much to say as usual in this book, but that's just because they're kind of just travelling along, going on an adventure, conquering different monsters along the way, so I feel like it's just a bit of a mediocre adventure book. And as I said with the Battle of the Labyrinth, I think the middle ones are not particularly my favourite, but so far in this one, what happened just as I closed up the last snippet of me talking is that Percy promised Nico that Bianca was going to be safe, and whenever somebody promises to look after someone's sibling, that sibling's going to die or something bad is going to happen to them, which I know sets up the dislike that Nico has for Percy in the 4th book. I knew that Bianca was going to have to die and that there was something that was going to make them, you know, not friends. I didn't think Bianca was going to die in the junkyard of the gods. I thought she was going to die at camp, because in the 4th book they talk about a memory where things go wrong at camp and a crack appears in the earth, and then they know that Nico is a child of Hades, but maybe that's when they reveal to Nico that Bianca's dead rather than Bianca dying there. So that might be the case. I'll have to read on further to know. There are mentions of Blackjack in this one. Absolutely has my whole heart. I love Blackjack the Pegasus, and also Dinius comes around for a warning. I just love Dinius as a character. He's so sassy, he does not care, he wears leopard print jogger outfits. I'm here for it. I'm here for Dinius. I also liked getting to see Apollo and just how they've characterized that god. I think the creativity with the Greek gods is definitely my favorite thing. So Apollo being the way that he is fantastic, but also I like the teasing relationship that he has with his twin sister Artemis, and also how he's helping them along this quest simply because nobody else messes with his twin sister. And speaking of gods, we get to see Aphrodite for a bit, and honestly the moment when Percy's like, Aphrodite looks a bit like Annabeth, and it's just like, yes, you've got such a crush, and Aphrodite's like, you're still in denial and I've got anguish and pining in your future. And yes, the romance is such a sweet slow burn in this one, so Aphrodite definitely was true to her word. But I just loved that whole scene just because it's setting up the ship in a bit more light, and while Ares is there to let him into the car, let Percy into the car where Aphrodite is and take him out again, I just remembered this scene where Percy gets on Ares' last nerve, where I think he fights him and manages to nick him with the sword, and Ares is not happy about that. So I think that's a scene that's going to be either in the 2nd or 1st book. Before Bianca died, there was a moment where she talks about the fact that she chose the Hunters because she wanted freedom from being an older sister, and I am an older sister myself and I can understand that to some degree, but I still feel like the Hunters was a bit of a drastic measure to get away from being an older sibling, if you ask me. And Bianca also mentioned the fact that they were at the Lotus Hotel and Casino before they went to the military school, so I'm just glad that my memory was intact and not just substituting parts of the film into my own memory. I still got it. I've still got it. It was another really cute moment where they arrive at Hoover's Dam, and Thalia, Percy and Grover list off these facts about the dam, and Zoe's like, how do you know this stuff? And they're all like, Annabeth, architecture geek. And it's just such a cute friendship moment, just a really sweet way to show how much they all care about Annabeth and actually listen to her even though they might not be interested in architecture themselves, and I love that. I also find it so funny that Bessie the cow serpent keeps showing up. She shows up in the 4th book, okay, but I thought like this was not a big deal, this is just some random cow serpent thing, but she showed up twice in this book. I think the thing that's striking me the most in this book is that characters are being introduced way before I expected them to be introduced. For example, just where I stopped reading, we have the scene with Rachel, Elizabeth Dare, where Percy swings a sword through her and then she kind of sends the skeleton zombies in a different direction so they don't chase Percy. And I knew that moment had to happen because in the 4th book they like meet again for a second time. But for some reason I placed that, I don't know, I feel like before I started my read it backwards, I thought that we met Thalia and Rachel and all of these long-term characters in the like 4th and 5th book. And then when we didn't meet them for the first time in the 4th and 5th book, I was like, wait, they're in the series so much earlier. Because I felt like the first 3 books were just, you know, the trio of Annabeth, Grover and Percy. So seeing that that's disrupted and not actually how it goes is blowing my mind a little bit. So it was just so interesting seeing Rachel at the beginning there. She was only in there for like 5 seconds, but I guess she gets more moments in the sequel books. Okay, so I finished Percy Jackson and the Titan's Curse. I'm here to talk to you about the end of the story. In the end of the story, we get to meet Annabeth's family momentarily and his dad, and her family does seem pretty cool. I'm not invalidating all of the bad experiences she's mentioned having with them in the past, but it was actually nice to see Annabeth's family. I completely forgot that we ever get to meet them at all. I liked the moment where Mr. D from, you know, Dineus helped them out and he just had his I actually don't care what happens to you attitude. I feel like it's so clear to me that he really does care about these kids, but he likes to just hide it underneath his veneer of I don't care what happens to anybody, I'm just trying to live out my exile moments. Take a moment to appreciate the fact that both Annabeth and Percy carried the sky briefly, but still they carried the sky. Also, I want to know, where is this fan art that shows the grey streak that Annabeth and Percy have from carrying the sky? I feel like that always is left out when it comes to fan art of them. Also, as soon as Zoe was like, yeah, Atlas is my papa, I was like, she gon' die, which she did. But it was kind of evident that the hunters were not going to be the ones who survived, and it was going to be the campers who are along for the ride who were going to survive this quest. We also have to take a moment to admire Thalia's strength. She actually fought Luke and pretty much fought him to the death. That must have taken so much strength. I know Annabeth doesn't have the strength to do that at any point in this series, but the fact that she takes him head on despite their history and tries her best to conquer him, that shows that girl has got some strength in her heart that I don't think even, I don't know who can possess that other than her. Then we get to the point where they've conquered everything, they go to the Olympians, and then the gods are there deciding whether they should kill or keep Percy and Thalia alive. I just could not help feeling so disappointed in the gods at that moment, simply because they are gods. They should be able to find other ways of dealing with their problems rather than just killing their offspring. What even is that? That's just goes to show how much work the gods have to do to become, I don't know, better than they are in this book. And also I found it so funny that they were all like, surprisingly, Hades is the only one who keeps the oath. And when I was reading that, I was like, lol, jokes on them. They're gonna find out that Hades did not stick to the oath of not having any children. However, later on, you find out that Hades did stick to the oath because Bianca and Nico have been alive for longer than the oath existed. So actually, Hades is the only one who stuck to the rules, which again just goes to show the hypocrisy of the gods who like to ignore Hades, but can't even stick to their own rules. I found it hilarious that Percy was like, oh, this is the second time I've been to Olympus, and also I haven't seen my dad in ages and I rarely ever see him, so he's so nervous to see his dad. And I just can't help thinking, just wait, because you and your dad are going to be on very familiar terms. In fact, him and Olympus are also going to be on very familiar terms very, very soon. But it's just interesting to see him still at that nervous stage around all of the gods and such. And then again, it was also so cute, the moment when he thinks Annabeth is going to join the hunters and he's so nervous and he doesn't want her to. The slow burn romances in this one are off the charts. Thalia joins the hunters. Now I knew that Thalia was going to join and Annabeth was not, and that Percy was worried that Annabeth would join because of references in the later books, but I didn't know that the reason that Thalia joined was A, because she was about to turn 16, and B, also because she was feeling too tempted. And I think it was a very wise decision. It kind of had to go that way, but I didn't know the reasons. I didn't really remember the reasons why. Also, I find it hilarious that the gods are like, oh, we're not going to kill these teenagers, right, time to celebrate. I just would have wanted to be out of there so quick. But either which way, they celebrate, and Athena comes and does the protective mother thing and is like, Percy, you better not mess with my daughter. Don't think you guys should be friends. And I just find that so funny. Just Athena just trying to be protectively loving on her daughter, but totally dissing Percy in the process. And she also tells Percy that his fatal flaw is loyalty, which I understand. Good things can be flaws if they're not moderated, but no wonder I love Percy so very much, because my favourite types of characters are always the loyal characters, which is why my favourite type of characters are often secondary characters, because secondary characters are usually incredibly loyal to the main character to a fault, and then I love them forever. So that is the reason why I probably love Percy so much, even though he's a main character, just because he's so incredibly loyal to all of his friends, and I love that, and it's very sweet. But yeah, it's supposed to be the flaw, but I just found that very sweet. We also have a moment where Percy phones Tyson, you know, with the iris message, and Tyson's like, yay, the shield worked, it saved your life, and Percy's just like, it's broken, but Tyson is just so happy that it worked, which is true, that is what shields are supposed to do, and it was just heartwarming because Tyson is the sweetest Cyclops ever. And he also phones his mum, and they have a little talk about this Paul guy. So this is where Paul shows up for the first time as being a romantic interest to Sally, and it was just so sweet. Any moment where Percy's talking to his mum is just incredibly sweet and makes me feel soft. And then last but not least, we get the Nico scene at the end where Nico is like, Percy, you didn't keep your promise, I hate you. The ground opens up and it swallows these soldiers that were chasing Percy. I completely forgot that they were a threat in the book by the end, so I guess it's good that Nico sorted it out for him. But it shows how Nico becomes how he is in the 4th book, which went pretty fast, and now they know he's a son of Hades, but they're keeping it all secret and everything. So that was that. And then the book finished. So all I can really say about this book is that I retained none of the plot. Like, I know I said I didn't remember much from the 4th book, but I actually remembered pretty much nothing other than names from this book. So the 3rd book is like a hole in my memory, and I do have some memories of the 2nd book. So it's really in the middle there that I just dropped off the side of the planet in terms of memory. And if I had to rate this one, I'd probably give it 3 stars again. I love all of the character dynamics, I love all of the creativity with the gods, but it's still quite a travel book with them having obstacles thrown in their way along the journey. And this one felt even more travel-y than the 4th one, which was not to its favour. But yeah, it's a good time. Again, I just think it's best when you're younger, but I'm still enjoying rereading this series backwards. Please let me know in the comment section down below if you agree with any of my thoughts or things that I've said in this video. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!